An absolute monumental tie. Huge title deciding. We're going to say it right now. It is title deciding. Man City against Arsenal. Harry and Kweku join me. This is as big as it ever gets. I don't think I've felt this way towards a fixture that's not related to my club in as long as I can remember. Let's just start with how you feel, because I feel like you feel a lot of things at the moment, Harry.
Stressed, nervous, all of the above. It's I'm not going to say it's a title decider, because I don't think it is. I think there's too much football still to be played. I think everything is really tight. And obviously, when you've got three teams in the race, it's quite different to if it was just a straight shootout between, two clubs that were gunning for the title. So I don't think it's a title decider. And I don't even think it's a must win for either side. I do think it's a must not lose, though, because psychologically the impact that could have, probably more so on Arsenal because they've not been there and done it, that could be massive. And I think Arsenal need to go there and get something from the game at the very least. And if they do, then I would say that Arsenal are in with a shout going into the
in with a shout.
back
Crazy.
end.
Crazy. We'll come back to that. Last season, when they met, Kevin De Bruyne had that moment where Tomiyasu played a short ball back to Ramsdale. That day, it felt like Arsenal, I don't want to say capitulated, but I feel like they did a little bit. But this time round, they've beaten City already this season. They've done well against Liverpool in both fixtures. And most people would argue that in big games, Arteta has it nailed. So in a lot of ways, you go, if he's had it nailed up until this point, Arsenal are unbeaten, if I'm not wrong.
In the new year, yeah.
In the new year. Scored 17 goals, did you say, before we started
Something
recording?
like that. In away games.
In away games. So, hey, Kweku, the stars are aligning.
The stars are aligning for Arsenal, but this is the trap that Arsenal fans don't want to fall into, because they have been very, very good since the turn of the year. But people forget how good Man City have been. They haven't lost a game since the beginning of December. And that just goes under the radar because it's Man City. But I think the difference between this season and previous seasons is that when Man City normally go on that run, they can pull away from teams. But there's still two other teams in this title race in the form of Liverpool and Arsenal. I think City as well, they've got something to prove. Because I think people kind of write them off. The narrative's not with City. I know that they've got the opportunity to win 4 in a row that's never been done before in English football. But I feel like the Klopp last dance narrative is more prevalent. I feel like Arsenal finally getting over the hurdle, that narrative is more prevalent. And so City might have a little bit of a chip on their shoulder. And I remember the game last year at the Etihad where they turned Arsenal over 4-1. Granted, Rob Holding started that game as centre-back for Arsenal. This is a very different Arsenal side who've got a bit more know-how this season. But this is a City team that have been there and done it, have got incredible experience at this level, at this stage of the season. So don't be surprised to see City go out there and dominate the ball against an Arsenal side that likes to dominate the ball, and Arsenal maybe have to try and take their chances like Liverpool do when they play against City. I know the last game at Anfield was slightly different, but Liverpool have been more than content to let City have the ball but then make most of their opportunities. And I feel like Arsenal are going to have to be opportunistic when it comes to taking chances against City in this game.
I think there's a maturity to this Arsenal side that we didn't see last season. If you go back to the clash between these two sides at the Emirates earlier in the season, where Arsenal did come out on top thanks to that deflected winner from Gabriel Martinelli, it was a lot more like a game of chess. In recent years, under Arteta, we've seen Arsenal go for Manchester City's throats and just not be good enough to lay a glove on them and end up conceding on the break or leaving spaces, making mistakes like the Tomiyasu one that you referenced. I think this time you go into the game knowing that Arsenal are actually capable of saying, we'll have the ball in this area, we'll allow you to have it in certain areas too, but we know what risks we can take and what risks we can't afford to take. And that's what they did in that game at the Emirates earlier this season. It was very much, we'll keep you at arm's length, we'll have a little bit of a go at certain points, and City were very much the same. And in the end, it was a deflected goal that made the difference. But you've got to stay in games that long to be in with a shout of something like that happening.
That's where I think it's really interesting, because we come into this game, and I think you touched on it earlier, Kweku said it off air as well, Arsenal need to not lose. City also need to not lose, because there's another horse in this race. But actually, for a lot of fans, whichever team wins this, people are going to immediately go, my hat's on them. Which is why I look at this and I go, who's going to win this for Arsenal? As I spoke to Harry before, and I was saying City have been there, like Kweku just said, and they know how to get past these fixtures. De Bruyne did it for them last season. De Bruyne's done it for them year after year. They've got Haaland, they've got Foden in good form. For Arsenal, I look at Martinelli, and I think he was the difference maker against City. He's been the difference maker against Liverpool on multiple occasions because he stretches the pitch. He's more dynamic, and potentially Walker might be injured. Akanji might be injured. Who knows, by the way? That could very quickly change on Sunday. But they may have to bring in a makeshift right back. There's been talk about potentially Rico Lewis. I look at Martinelli and I think you could be the guy that stretches City. You could be the guy that gets Arsenal on the counter. And this could be the game for you, because prior to injury, he was in great form.
Yeah, I mean, it's touch and go whether he's going to be fit or not. You know, there was talk that he suffered a cut, and then we saw him on crutches at the Emirates Stadium after a recent game, and he hasn't been seen since. So we don't know if he's going to be available. Obviously, he wasn't involved in the internationals, but you do feel like, especially if Kyle Walker's not available, that could be a real key area in deciding this fixture, because we saw Manchester United even not so long ago against Manchester City kind of stretch them down their left-hand side, City's right-hand side, and Kyle Walker's pace and ability to get out of trouble was City's saving grace kind of thing. But for Martinelli to be on the pitch, I think is really, really important. Arsenal like to build an overload down that left, and without Kyle Walker, that's certainly a weak spot for City.
100%. And the difference with Arsenal this season as well is if you look at all of the big games against the traditional contenders, Arsenal have left those games as the happier side. Think about the draw at Anfield, and then you beat them at the Emirates. You think about the game against Man City that you've already touched on at the Emirates as well. The United game where you got that late winner. Even the Spurs game where you drew. You didn't play well in that game. You were happy to come out of that game with a draw because Spurs could have really got all 3 points. Even against Chelsea where you're 2-0 down, got a draw out of that. So in all the big games against the traditional big sides, Arsenal have got good results. If Arsenal go into this game against Man City and they beat them, that would have been 8 points out of a possible 12 against Liverpool and Man City. If you're unbeaten against those two big sides that you're chasing down the title for, then you should really go on to win this league. And so I think Arsenal got that confidence. I'm throwing the bait out there. I'm seeing if you're nibbling. Arsenal got the confidence of these big games. They've got big game players now that can turn up in these moments. And I feel like for Arsenal, this is the culmination. This is the final boss. To nick a WWE term, the Rock's come back as the final boss. And this is it for Arsenal, because if they beat Man City, I think they'll be full of confidence. And I know there's potential pit holes in terms of the game against Spurs, against United, against Chelsea potentially. But I think that if Arsenal get this win on the weekend, then they will be title favourites in my opinion.
That pressure that Kweku's pushing over to me, you can take it back over there. Look, you're right in that Arsenal have been much more competitive in the bigger games against the traditionally bigger sides. The problem is that that's not really where the pressure is. Now, if Arsenal were to go to the Etihad and get beat at the weekend, it will be disappointing. It would be a psychological blow. But nobody's going to say, oh, wow, they bottled it, because it's Manchester City. The problem comes when you face teams that you're expected to beat. You face low blocks, games get a bit nervous, things get a little bit tetchy. That's when you have to examine Arsenal through a slightly different lens, but it's still equally as important. And if you look across this season, some of the games that Arsenal dropped points in, West Ham at home, beaten. Nobody saw that result coming at the time. West Ham were in a poor run of form, and then going away to Fulham and getting beaten. If Arsenal had put those points on the board, we'd be talking about a very different title race. So it can swing either way, can't it?
It's the standards that have been set, though, because we're picking out these games. But I remember back in the day, you could lose 5 games and win the title. These days, it's very, very different because of the levels that Man City and Liverpool have set. I know you're picking out specific games. I know Arsenal fans at the end of the season points in Newcastle game, for example, where you drop points as a signifier. Or like you say, the Fulham robbed. We're not starting that one. Or the Fulham game, like you touched on as well. A Fulham home and away, no?
Fulham, it was a draw.
Yeah, and so it's so tight at the top of the table, and the standards are just absolutely incredible. And yet Arsenal will maybe feel aggrieved if they don't go on to win the title, if they do beat City, and then you look at the other results that they didn't pick up points in. But I just feel like with the confidence that you'd gain by beating the reigning champions, the current treble holders, Arsenal should be favourites to the title if they win on Sunday.
It also speaks to what you said in the sense that, because there's 3 horses in this race, it really is critical to take points off the other teams. And if Arteta does that, he'd be more successful than Klopp and Pep at this point. On Pep and on City, the one area that I look at for City and I go, what will he do there? We've seen Doku come in and out the side, but Foden is the key man. Does he play him centrally? He didn't against Liverpool, then he brought him central, and things happen against United, exactly the same. He had a very good game against Newcastle, 87 touches in a central area of the pitch. Then they pushed Bernardo Silva out wide right. Then, of course, if Walker's injured, does Bernardo play out there? That's one area where I go, City have a lot of game breakers. FIFA Street term. You have Kevin De Bruyne, you have Erling Haaland, you have Bernardo, but Rodri in big games. Foden's now one of these characters as well. How do they shovel him into this team? Do they play 2 10s? Does he fully risk it?
I think it depends on how the game's going. Because teams kind of make a business decision when it gets to the 70th minute. Do we want to go for all 3 points, or are we both happy to take a point out of this? But we've seen Phil Foden in games where Man City have needed to get all 3 points. You think about the United game where he almost had a free role. I know he did most of his damage on the left-hand side, but he was drifting in centrally and picking up the ball and doing the kind of job that Kevin De Bruyne would do as a game breaker in previous seasons. We've seen Phil Foden do this, and we've seen KDB come off in crucial situations where you normally think that he's the man to take the horse by the reins and be the man to bring City out of trouble. It's been Phil Foden this season, and so it's hard to pigeonhole him in position. I've seen him do some great work down the left, but I think centrally is the position that he can create the most damage and create the most mayhem for Arsenal in terms of players having to drop deep and pick them up and be in position that they don't necessarily want to be in. I feel like it's going to be interesting to see who Arsenal play in midfield. Does Jorginho start centrally? Because I think Jorginho's great in terms of dictating the tempo of the game, but I don't necessarily think that that's what Arsenal will need against a City side that I think will dominate the ball at the Etihad. So I think it's all dependent on what Arsenal do and how they line up in terms of where Phil Foden will pick up space in areas.
I think that's a great point about, it depends on what Arsenal's midfield looks like. If you go back to that game when they met earlier in the season, Arsenal did go longer a little bit more often than they normally do. And they used Kai Havertz at points in that game as a bit of a target man to bring the ball down and get people in and around him. And ultimately, that's where the goal came from. Having Kai Havertz and Tomiyasu, for some reason, was up there at that point as well. And the ball dropped to Martinelli, from which he scored. But I think with Phil Foden, for me, he does his damage in central areas, but I don't know if I'd start him in a central area, particularly if Arsenal are going to play with controllers like Jorginho and Rice. And I expect Jorginho to start. Thomas Partey is back in the picture, but how fit can he be? He's played a behind closed doors friendly during the international break and got a handful of minutes in a couple of games recently. He's not ready to come back into the side. And I think if I was Pep, I'd start Foden on the left with a view to him obviously drifting in field, but you can't have... I don't want to call Phil Foden a liability because he's not that, and he never would be that. He's such a talented player. But defensively, against the very best, he could be seen as that. So maybe that's not the right move in terms of playing him from the beginning in the central area. He can drift there, but to start him, there's a risk, I think.
It is a risk. I think where Arsenal can also gain the advantage on City, and it's strange to say this about an Arsenal side, is physicality. That's the difference between Arsenal this season and last season. Jorginho in that midfield.
You've loved this all season. You've loved this aspect of Arsenal being...
Mate, it's because you look at Arsenal's fullbacks now. They've got centre backs playing the fullbacks. They've got Kivior and they've got Ben White as their fullbacks, and they're all of a sudden like that, one of the most physical teams in the league. City were that for the last couple of seasons, and I feel like that's where Arsenal can gain an advantage, because at the Etihad, City are going to have the majority of the ball. But like you say, when Kai Havertz came off the bench against City in the first game, that physicality was what disrupted City, and we saw that in the Community Shield game as well. So I think that's where Arsenal can gain an advantage, and I think you maybe lose that if you start Jorginho in midfield. I know Partey's not fit enough to start this game, but that could be the kind of curveball that could win Arsenal this game as opposed to drawing it.
Kai Havertz, by the way, I think he's got history with Man City.
Yeah.
At Chelsea, scoring that goal. He's got 7 goals in his last 8 games from a club and country. People seem to have gone, Kai Havertz is the real deal now. I love it, by the way. I love it for the narrative. So I think he could be crucial in this fixture. In the same way, I think Haaland will be crucial, because Haaland, I thought, was poor early. I mean, generally this season, I've been absolutely crucified for saying this. I don't think he's played well, but he scored goals. And I think Kai Havertz is playing well, but doesn't put the ball in the back of the net every single time. And this is the sort of fixture where those things become important. Like, Haaland needs 1 chance in this fixture, and Kai Havertz might need 2. And in these fixtures, you don't get 2.
I've got a different perspective on that. I think that Erling Haaland's the kind of striker that gets you the 3rd goal in a 3-1 win. But when we've seen these big games, Erling Haaland's very rarely the striker that gets you the first goal or the winner. It's always the icing on top of the cake. And so I want to see Erling Haaland turn up. I want to see Erling Haaland do dirt against Arsenal, who he's again.
To be fair, he did last year at the Etihad.
When we took the hairband off and the hair was flowing, and we remember that. But I want to see Erling Haaland really stamp his mark on this game, because you think about last season, he played in a few semi-finals and a few finals, didn't score goals in those games. This is basically a final. It feels like a final anyway. And so I want to see Erling Haaland turn up. I remember last time you were on the show, Harry, though, we had a debate about Kai Havertz and asked would he get to double figures in the Premier League. I said, no way, no how. That's what happened. He's on 8 right now, and I'm feeling very, very nervous. He's done well this season. I think Arteta deserves a lot of credit for what he's done with Kai Havertz.
I was going to bring that up, but I didn't want to be seen to be gloating, so I thought I'd leave it to you. But yeah, look, I think for Kai Havertz, it's been a difficult season. It's been a transitional season, because not only has he joined another club and been playing in a totally different system and setup, he's been playing as a number 8 at times. And that was always going to take him some time to adapt to. I think his best football has come recently, where he's been playing as a false 9, but you have to have the right ingredients around you to be able to play that role in the way that he does, and for it to be successful. If you've got Saka and Martinelli coming in from either flank and getting close to you, and Martin Odegaard getting up alongside you as well, then it makes that job a lot easier. But with the confidence comes the level with Kai Havertz, and I think he's in a really good place right now. And a lot of Arsenal fans, even that were super critical of him at the start of the season, are eating humble pie now.
Man, I'm excited for this one. I'm excited to hear your predictions because I just start with you, Kweku.
It's boring. It's boring, but I'm going to go for a draw 2-2. I'm sorry. Sitting on the fence firmly there.
I'm going to go for Manchester City 1, Arsenal 2.
Oh, brave boy. Brave boy. I've been here so many times with Man City, not personally. I can't see past them. I'm going to go Man City 3, Arsenal 1. Let us know what you think in the comments.